It seems as though the Minnesota Wild have a little bit of a game of musical chairs on their hands. Rem Pitlick was put on waivers. We look at how that impacts Matt Boldy's status for the rest of the season. Plus, once everybody comes back from injury, who is left outside looking in? We talk about all that, plus Jon Merrill's extension today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked On Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we take a look at the Jon Merrill extension and what that may mean for Calen Addison's spot amongst the Wild defensive core. We also take a look at Rem Pitlick being put on waivers, what that means for his future with the Minnesota Wild. And with all the injuries the Minnesota Wild have sustained, once everybody comes back healthy, who ends up being the odd man out? We take a look at all of that here on today's show. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer with well over a decade's worth of experience covering your favorite Minnesota teams and now switching allegiances to the Minnesota Wild and at the helm of Locked on Wild here for the 2021-2022 season. Happy to have you along on a Wednesday edition of the show and going with a little bit of a catch-up day type format for today's show. Obviously, some big news from the Minnesota Wild, an extension and notice of a player being put on waivers. So we will talk about those moves today and try to speculate as to how the roster is going to shape up as players continue to get healthy enough to where they can get back to the regular roster. So a lot to discuss here today, and we'll start it off with the extension news. I personally was a little caught by surprise by this move, and not to say that it's not deserved because it is, but it just seemed as though Jon Merrill was maybe a candidate to only sign a 1-year deal and to maybe go elsewhere with Calen Addison ready to step in and fill a spot amongst the Wild's top 6 defensemen. That was before the season started. Didn't really know a whole lot as to what to expect from Jon Merrill coming into this season, but let's take a look at what Jon Merrill was going to be asked to do coming into this year. Obviously, the third line pairing for the Minnesota Wilds vacated. Carson Soucy and Ian Cole. Cole heading to Carolina via free agency, and Soucy picked by the Seattle Kraken in the expansion draft. So you're trying to replace those two guys. The Wild also losing Ryan Suter to the Dallas Stars. So trying to replace a lot of ice time, a lot of points, a lot of block shots, a lot of everything that those guys were able to provide in last season's team. Alex Goligoski comes in and he fills that Suter spot and has filled it up until he was injured and out of the lineup. Filled in great and looked the part of a guy who was more of a top 4 of the D core. Jon Merrill was simply asked to step in and fill the spot of Ian Cole with Dmitry Kulikov, and the hope was that those two guys would form a third line that produced in a similar fashion to how the Wild's third line defense pairing did last year, which is a lot of block shots. Not going to do anything that directly hurts the team. Maybe not going to um, get shout outs all that much in terms of scoring and such. And Jon Merrill has far and away exceeded my expectations for him this season. Already with 11 points on the year in 33 games, his career high in points 15 in 57 games. So well on his way to shattering his all-time mark for points in a season. Also, currently at 51 blocks. Now, you look at what Ian Cole did last year for the Wild. Finished the season with 92 blocks in 52 games for the Wild. He also played 2 games with Colorado, had 2 blocks there. So 94 total blocks for the Wild and the Avalanche. Also had a goal and 7 assists. So minimal point guide, but great at blocking shots, and that's something that Ian Cole has always brought to the table. Multiple seasons of well over 100 blocks in his career, and so Jon Merrill comes in, and with Cam Talbot and Capo Kakinen in net, some of the pressure taken off as to what he's expected to do on any given basis or any nightly basis. But as we stand right now, Jon Merrill tied for the team lead in block shots. And so if you in a vacuum are just saying, well, Jon Merrill, Ian Cole, interchangeable, and things work out just the way that they did last year. All in all, really not a bad way to do it, and really not a bad signing at all by Bill Guerin to bring Merrill in to fill that third line pairing. Now, obviously, with Spurgeon and Brodin out, both Merrill and Dmitry Kulikov have been playing a little higher in the lineup, playing more like a second line D pairing, and so they're playing more minutes. But you look at especially the last 2 games in particular, and I know Brodin played during the Boston game, but the last 2 games in particular, those guys have really done some very good things, and so this is an absolute home run extension for Bill Guerin and the Wild. You get Jon Merrill coming in for a 3-year extension, and you lower his cap hit um, to be able to help slide him in at a lower rate with those buyouts that will start to escalate here over the next couple of seasons. So this is just a as Bill Guerin of a move as acquiring Ian Cole was last year. And so Guerin, he knows the buttons to push to get the most out of the D linemen for this team. Dean Evison plays him well, and all in all, just a great move. Although I find myself wondering if that means that somebody in that top 6 is going to be dealt to try to get a spot for Kalen Addison next year, because as it stands right now, you really can't continue to just put Kalen Addison on the taxi squad and have him just sit and not play. You got to get him into the lineup at some point. And I know he's been playing recently with all the injuries going on, but once people come back, and we'll talk about this more at the end of the show, once people start to come back, you can't just put him on the taxi squad and have him sit and wait to potentially be part of the team or to likely just end up sitting and missing games. The biggest thing that's going to help Kalen Addison continue to make the jump from prospect to pro is by playing. And so if Addison is going to play, then somebody is going to have to be moved to clear up a spot in the top 6. And I think at this point, all signs probably point to Matt Dumba, but who knows? It could be a situation too where Goligoski is allowed to just walk at the end of the season and is not retained. Then at that point, there's a spot for Addison. Maybe something happens with Dmitry Kulikov, who is signed past this season as well. Bill Guerin, the biggest thing for Bill Guerin is that he, with this move, he's got options. Dumba is locked in for a couple more seasons. Obviously, Brodin and Spurgeon are signed long term. Merrill now with 3 years under his belt. Kulikov with a couple of years under his belt. Bill Guerin has options with what to do with the decor. If he wants to move Dumba to free up salary and to get something more offense oriented in return, he certainly can. And that just furthers the great job that these guys have done with cultivating this Wild roster, um, putting themselves in position to make moves or to scale things back a little bit, depending on how things go till we get to the trade deadline. So, congratulations for Jon Merrill. Happy to see him get the extension. Happy to keep that gorgeous lettuce that he has on top of his head and the six stash as well. Happy to keep that in Minnesota long term, and he has been a great fit for this Wild team this season so far. So that's an update on the Jon Merrill extension. Again, remember that Merrill signing the extension means that his job of filling Ian Cole's vacancy has been a success. And so just keep throwing him out there and hoping that we get some good things that happen for this Wild team the rest of the way. So the Merrill extension is in the books. When we come back, we will talk a little bit about another roster move that was made as Rem Pitlik hit waivers. We talk about that next here on Locked On Wild. It is 2022, and that means New Year's resolutions are in full swing. If yours involves getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plans. Built Bar is the perfect protein bar that tastes like a candy bar and maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and just 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. If you have snack stashes throughout your house, go round up those candy bars, those sweets, put them somewhere else, throw them away, and fill those spots up with Built Bars so that you'll never go hungry and you have unlimited options for great taste with Built Bar. So head to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, and again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Reminder, we are available wherever you listen to podcasts and whenever you would like to listen to podcasts. So, beyond the Jon Merrill extension, the Wild also made a fairly notable roster move as well yesterday by putting Rem Pitlik on waivers. Enter Michael Russo into the conversation as he tweeted earlier yesterday. Rem Pitlik, the last Minnesota Wild player on the ice today in practice, has been placed on waivers. If he clears, he can go to the taxi squad or can even be sent to Iowa as well. This kind of confirms a theory that I had about Rem Pitlik heading into the season, and I can't recall if it was vocalized enough or if it was one that I just had kind of filed away to come back to later. But I remember at the time with the Rem Pitlik waiver claim that we made to get him here, everybody was looking and was saying, that's kind of weird. Because why wouldn't we just have, Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi make the team outright and just come up with the team? And obviously, Matt Boldy's injury news was a huge factor into why this happened. But if you really look at it, Rem Pitlik really was nothing more than just injury insurance for Matt Boldy until he was ready to return. And Pitlick did some really good things for the Wild and has done some really good things for the Wild so far this season. Had the hat trick against Seattle earlier this year. And so it seems as though there's something there. It maybe just isn't quite ready for the NHL. And somebody on Twitter asking Michael Russo if there were good odds that Pitlick would clear. Russo saying he doesn't do waiver odds. Anybody that picks him has to keep him on the NHL roster, except the Predators, who can send him to the taxi squad, or the minors if they're the only ones to put a claim in on him. So that's a little bit of a double-edged sword, too, is that Pitlick would have to stay on the NHL roster. And so I think the Wild just got to the point where they said, look, Matt Boldy's ready to come back. We're going to give him that spot. And Pitlick, assuming that he doesn't go to the taxi squad, I think would make a lot of sense to go to Iowa and to just play a ton and just continue to develop. Tim Army, one of the best at developing young players. So give him a chance. Give him a chance to work with Tim Army, and you could end up further cultivating some of those intangibles that Pitlick brings to the table. But for now, it was all a matter of time until Matt Boldy was ready to come back and be part of the Minnesota Wild's roster. So I'm not surprised that it happened. I'm surprised that it happened as quickly as it did, but if he clears, then the Wild just put him either on the taxi squad or in Iowa and just let him do his thing. So I don't think it's the last that we'll see of Rem Pitlik. Now, I did say that with Victor Rask, for those that listened a couple days ago, where the title of the episode was, "Is this the last of Victor Rask?" And obviously it hasn't been, because he played the Winter Classic, he played against Boston, he played against Washington over the weekend. But that leads me to kind of the wrap-up topic here for today, as we do summarize that Rem Pitlick's best thing that he could have given the Wild from a contribution standpoint was buying time until Matt Boldy was ready to come back and to make an immediate impact with his team. So mission accomplished for Rem Pitlick. Condolences out to State of Hoppy, though. As a huge Rem Pitlick fan, he obviously did not take the news particularly well. But like I said, I don't think it's the last that we'll see of Mr. Rem Pitlick here this season. As mentioned, with Boldy back and healthy and playing, there are plenty of other Wild players who are working their way back from various injuries, which could lead to a very interesting couple of roster moves as the Wild try to kind of fill things out, get back on track, and go on a playoff push. So we will finish the show by talking about the roster musical chairs for the Minnesota Wild. That is next here on Locked On Wild. Got beard? Get primal. You heard me right. Got beard? Get primal. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get primal. Maybe you're that guy who has never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Primal Origin oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. The products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients and with low impact on our planet. Primal Origin Oils makes balms, oils, and whipped butter that are renowned as the best feel in beard products available. All products are fair trade certified and handcrafted right here in the United States. We know that every company claims to have the best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and the feel in beard to the other products you've used. We promise you will see and feel the difference. So make sure to use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. Again, use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Wrapping things up because Kirill Kaprizov, Joel Eriksson, Jordan Greenway, guys are starting to get back on the practice ice to where we could see them before too long. Super exciting considering the Trent Frederick. And now I've gone, I think I've gone 3 or 4 consecutive days talking Trent Frederick. So probably at this point should look to move beyond that topic. But Kirill Kaprizov, it sounds like the update from Dean Evison was that Kaprizov is going to try to practice and try to play on Friday. So obviously, if that's the case, major bullet dodged with a potential long-term injury that it looked like it was going to be for the Minnesota Wild. Looked like it was going to be a collarbone, a dislocated shoulder, something along those lines. And at this point, looks like it was just simply a jammed shoulder as Kaprizov was blasted into the boards by Trent Frederick. So obviously, that's huge good news. When Kaprizov comes back, though, then the questions move on to who ends up being sent back down to fill that spot. So offensively, as it stands right now, I mean, Pitlick was put on waivers, so you have for Friday, you theoretically could get Joel Eriksson, Jordan Greenway, and Kirill Kaprizov back, maybe Brandon Duhaime. But at that point, then the offensive side, the forward side of the equation, will be at full strength, and that I think is a scary proposition for teams throughout the rest of the NHL to see the Wild get back to that level that they were at earlier in the season. But you run out of names to potentially throw to the curb to bring these guys back in. I mean, you've got Victor Rask, who could, I suppose, get put back on the taxi squad, depending on if somebody else would try to claim him, but nobody did the first time. So you could go that route with Victor Rask, is just put him on the taxi squad and hang on to him for the rest of the year at least, for some injury insurance. But beyond that, I mean, really the only other name that you could justify pulling out of the lineup would, I guess, be Brandon Duhaime. I think it sends the wrong message if all of a sudden, with guys coming back in, Matt Boldy just gets sent back to Iowa. So I think you got to keep him up, which means that one of your regulars, your Nick Bugstads, or any of the other guys, Rask, one of those guys is probably going to be sitting on the bench when they come back, and we won't hear any issues with it because this team is just such a cohesive unit. But it does bear watching and keeping an eye on because there are going to be some roster questions that the Wild have to answer, and you look at the defensive side of things too. Obviously, waiting for word on Spurgeon and Brodin. But when they come back, when Alex Goligoski comes back, I mean, you've got Dakota Mermis up right now, and that's pretty much it. So at this point, do you send Addison and Mermis back down and put Jordy Ben back as the seventh defenseman once you get Spurgeon and Brodin back? I mean, that's not a bad way to play it at all, but like I said, some big roster moves are coming. It's just a matter of getting to that point, just treading water. Back in swim class, just treading water until those guys are ready to come back. Then we get the full team, and it is pedal to the metal all the way throughout the rest of the season. That is going to wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Now that your first listen of the day is done, you can swing over to Locked On Bets for your second listen, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is also available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just like Locked On Wild, we're available wherever you want to listen. We're available whenever you feel like listening to your podcasts. You can also find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, keeping you as up to date on Minnesota Wild hockey as possible. If a puck drops in the state of hockey, Locked On Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.